Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Samanthropolitics. I'm your host, Samantha Carlin. I'm delighted to be here with you. This is your source for global news with a feminist lens. Today, we're actually going to be looking domestically because the midterm elections are coming up in less than 1 week. So, first of all, I think the fact that we're even talking about the midterms is a good thing. There was one point where people were like, oh, what was the midterms? Is that something that I need to vote in? Because midterm turnout is typically lower than presidential elections. But there are so many states, so many Senate seats, so many House seats, so many state Senate and House and state House seats that are up in the air right now, and so many swing voters that I think people are really paying attention to the midterm elections. Now, we have three guests waiting in the wings, two who are running in their respective races in Virginia and in Texas in very competitive districts, both women. And we have alumni of the Women's Leadership Challenge, which is the leadership program that I teach, Olivia Logan, who's a political consultant who is also waiting in the wings to give us her take on important swing seats in the Senate, reproductive rights, gun violence, the economy, and all other issues, and to give us her predictions on what's going to happen in some of these hotly contested races. So I want to thank you for tuning in with us tonight, and please encourage you to stay till the end to hear from all of our guests who are all really amazing trailblazers within the political system in America. So Zach, let's put up that first graph. What do people care about in the elections this year? Well, inflation and the economy take the number one slot. Ironically, the majority of people seem to think that Republicans have a better handle on the economy, even though historically that's not true. Let's remember who said it's the economy, stupid, Bill Clinton. The second thing that really concerns people are crime and violence. With a lot of Republicans running law and order type campaigns, trying to say that Democrats are not good at law and order or they're not good at decreasing gun violence. That's despite the fact that the reason that we have more guns than people in this country is because Republicans who do not want to pass gun restrictions, even though the majority of Americans, including Republicans, do support universal background checks, do support red flag laws, do support assault weapons bans and bans on high capacity magazines. And yet, the Republicans are running on the law and order side, which I still don't completely understand how that works. Now, what do Democrats care about more than Republicans? Well, Democrats are more concerned with things like racism, which makes sense considering Black Lives Matter, with with climate change, and with abortion and reproductive rights with the overturning of Roe v. Wade. What do Republicans care more about? They care the most about the economy, about curbing illegal immigration, and about crime. Again, even though the majority of gun laws are kept in place by Republicans who refuse to turn them over because they're beholden to the NRA. Other issues that have come up are January 6th, with one issue in this country is that many people who are running on the Republican side are election deniers. They believe in something called the Great Lie, which means that they still don't think that Joe Biden won the election. I guess they didn't get the memo. So there's also something particularly dangerous about this election because we have election deniers that are running for office. I would say that somebody that's denying the election is also denying the democratic process and the whole concept of democracy as a whole. Now, let's look at the House. So you can see in this chart, Zach, you could put that chart up, that the Democrats currently control the House of Representatives with 220 seats versus 212 for Republicans. Then you can put up that next map. You can see that this has shifted and swapped time over time, with it going like that over the last 30 or so years. Zach, if you could put up that next map, you can see where the most hotly contested races are within the House. For example, states like Arizona are incredibly important when it comes to House races. How about the Senate? Zach, you can put up that map. Thank you to the New York Times for creating this graph. Let's look at the swing seats in the Senate. So what we're looking at are Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Nevada being really the toss-ups that we're not sure what's going to happen in particular races. These are incredibly important states. Florida, North Carolina, and Ohio leaning Republican, and Arizona, Colorado, and New Hampshire leaning Democrat. So those are the key Senate races we want to pay attention to. And when we have Olivia on later in the show, she's going to talk to us about some of those particular races. Now, obviously, some of the issues that are really, really important that we're going to be talking about tonight are Roe v. Wade, are gun violence, are the economy, are why women have a particularly unique approach to some of these issues, and how do they affect women differently. So another thing to mention, since we do talk a lot about feminism in this show, is that women are the best voters. Women vote higher than men in every election, including the midterms and the presidential elections. So I would just say to all of those women out there that are voting, thank you. I would also say, and this is based on anecdotal experience working on political campaigns, that women also make up the majority of volunteers. I can count on one hand, working for the Democratic Party, how many men walked in the door. I'll never forget being in Hillary for America campaign and seeing a older white male veteran walk in the door, and I was just astonished. And I was so happy. I was like, thank you. I'm so glad to have you. So I would say too, besides everyone's going to tell you, vote, 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 volunteer. These last few days are so important. It's called GOTV, or Get Out the Vote. Incredibly, incredibly important time, not just to donate, but also to physically go knock on doors. It does work. Talking to voters about issues does work in terms of helping them to vote and to decide who to vote for. So I want to go to one of our guests because she is running around to events tonight. She is in Texas and is a Democratic candidate for Texas State Senate in the 9th District, Gwenn Burud. She is a proud native of Fort Worth, Texas. She's a wife, mom, a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing, an activist, and now a candidate for Texas Senate District 9. She grew up understanding the importance of education and earned a master's degree from Texas Women's University. She recently retired from a local school district where she specialized in working with the families of deaf and hard of hearing infants, toddlers, and the birth to 3 age range, which means Gwenn has incredible patience, which is something you really need in order to get things done in politics, because you have to listen to people and respond to them, not just talk over them. So I would say already I'm a fan of Gwenn. She has also seen the Texas education system from the view of a student, a public school teacher, and a parent, and she knows that as a state, Texas can do better when it comes to education. Gwenn, welcome to Samanthropolitics.
Thank you so much, Samantha. I really appreciate you having me on.
So how did you end up running for office? Let's hear your story. Since women just don't run as much as men. I mean, the numbers tick up and then they still linger around 29%. So talk to me about your why.
Yes. Yeah. What is it? A woman has to be asked about 7 times before she might decide to run. Yeah. So a little bit like the bio said, I was, first of all, my parents also, in addition to emphasizing education, they emphasized the fact that we should be involved in government. We should understand what our leaders are doing. I will tell you, the first introduction I had to really being like inspired by the political arena is watching old video footage of Barbara Jordan. And if you don't know Barbara Jordan, she is a hero here for us Texans, especially as Texas women. She was not only a state senator here, but she was a United States representative, as well as she was on the Nixon impeachment hearings. And just the way that she laid out that case, it was like, that can be a force for good. So that was one way. That was how I got interested. But then I've been an activist since about 2008. I'm going to say it's Barack Obama pretty much inspired me. But then I learned about state and local politics and how significant it is, and how that we really need to focus on those folks who are representing us at the state level, because that's what's affecting us daily. So knocked on a lot of doors for campaigns. You know, I was on the board of a lot of Democratic clubs. And then 2016 happened, and we all know how that goes. So, but what I found, I went to the Women's March in Austin, and I was so inspired by what I saw, because we were all in that deep funk for so long. And seeing that and seeing all
which Women's March was this? What year?
It was in 2017. It was the first one. So
Okay.
it was that, yeah. So, and like I said, I went to Austin, and then I found out, you know, we knew that they were happening all over, but we didn't know the impact it would have and how many would be coming. And it was like, okay, we can be this force for change. And then I get back to my old, you know, activist lifestyle, and then I see all these great candidates stepping up to run, and especially female candidates. And I was just so inspired by it. And then I saw, okay, which one's running and for state senate? I had a personal beef with my state senator because he was a former school board member who forgot about public education along the way. He's pushed for
What do you
school
mean
choice.
he forgot about public education? What do you mean by that?
So he is a school choice proponent, and what that means is that push for privatization. In fact, he wants vouchers, and he is going strong for those. So this, I couldn't understand.
Can you just describe, why is that bad?
So vouchers, what they do is they take money away from your already struggling public schools and put that into a private venture. Or so, and it could be anything, and it's really, it could be like, say here they talked about $5,000 for a voucher. Well, that's just a discount for people who can already afford it, and it can be for a religious institution. So my tax dollars are paying for someone to send their child to a religious institution where their teachers are not required to have the same oversight as, say, teachers in a public school. We have to be certified. They don't have to be certified in the private school sector.
I didn't know that. So like in Catholic, is that why there's so many nuns that are like teachers?
Well, I don't know. Haven't thought. Yeah, but yeah, they just don't have the same oversight. And so, and also, we also look at charter schools as well. Again, they are also taking money from public schools as well. They are completely funded by the state, whereas public schools are funded more by the tax dollars, or like your property taxes, and the state kicks in the rest pretty much. So charter schools are already doing that, taking that money away, and they don't have that oversight as well. Now, as you know, they are required to do well on to meet the expectations on standardized testing, and they have reviewed that way, but that's about it. And they even elect their own school boards, whereas they appoint their own school boards, whereas in an ISD or a public school, those school board members have to be elected. Well, the charter system picks their own. Yeah, and same in the private sector as well. Private schools as well. So I just didn't understand why a former public school board trustee is doing this, knowing the struggles that we have in public school. And well, when you follow the money, you find out.
And when you say when you follow the money, you find out, what do you mean by that?
You find out that he gets donations from a lot of charter school organizations, and or not even charter, but also private school. Like I don't know if you've seen the CNN documentary "Follow the Money," or Deep in the Pockets of Texas. I'm sorry, but it basically means follow the money. There's we call the Wilkes and the Dunns are big into wanting to push for these private schools. They have their own in their area of Texas, and basically they're controlling their legislators. How? Through their donations and through making sure that they vote the way that they want them to vote. Previously, it was Empower Texans. I don't know if you've heard anything about that one. It's basically 5 big donors, billionaires, putting it into this organization that then buys their legislators. Now it's,
Mm.
gosh, I'm missing the name. They changed the name because we caught on to it. So the name is escaping me. So that is something that I thought, okay, nobody's running against him. I am. So that's
I
what got me
love that.
into it
I
in
love that. So you're
2018. And
like,
that,
I am.
yeah, and that was 2018. We did pretty well on that one. It was a 30-point deficit from 2014, the person who ran then, 30-point deficit. When I ran, we increased that by 22 points. We
Wow.
narrowed the margins. And so we did a lot of work, and it was a long shot race. And then the Biden numbers put it at this particular district at a Republican +2.
Wow.
And then gerrymandering happened. So
Mm.
I'm running in a different district, but it is still winnable. Depending on who you talk to, that's in that 9 to 13-point range.
I still think that,
But
it's so important to point out, people always say like, well, like, what's the point of running if you don't win? And like, I always think about the Stacey Abrams example of how Stacey Abrams really laid the groundwork for Georgia to have two Democratic senators, which was like unheard of. She
right,
lost, but her coalition, her NGO did so much voter registration and voter outreach that it
mhm,
really laid the groundwork for Georgia to become blue, which really was
right,
unheard of. So I think that that's really
right,
awesome that you were able to take that, something that was so heavily Republican and
mhm,
build up the Democratic base.
right.
Why? I mean, why do people vote for you? What's your appeal? Like, why should people vote for you?
I think I'm not your traditional politician. I'm a public school teacher. I'm a mom. Uh, I run a grassroots campaign, which means we don't take corporate PAC money. So
Mhm.
I'm somebody you can trust, I think. And I'm somebody that's, you know, hard at work being a change agent. One of the things that people say about me is I have hustle. I'm always knocking on doors. I'm always on the phone asking for those donor dollars. Or I'm always talking, just I'm hustling around to different events just to make sure that more people can hear what the message is that we have to say. And the big thing is here in Texas, we are the number 9 world economy.
Mm,
And that's great. It's something to be proud of. We're a prosperous Texas. However, we're leaving the most vulnerable behind.
mhm.
So I'm here for the everyday person who's like me. So I would say that's
So what are
part of
your
the
top
appeal.
issues that if you like, you're in office day one,
Mhm.
what do you do? What are the top issues that you take on?
Dear Lord, put me on that public ed committee. Put me on education. One of the things that we have an issue with here in Texas is the funding of our public schools, the formula that they use. It relies heavily on your property taxes, and as home values go up, that means people are paying more and more into the public schools or education, and the state is kicking in less and less. Like, say, in 2011, we had a 50-50 split. 50% came from your property taxes, the other 50% came from the state. Now that has gone down to about a 60 something 40 something split, or 60-40 split, depending. Sometimes yeah, so at one point it was like at 34% for the state, and the rest was kicked in by your property taxes. So that's got to change, because you're unfairly penalizing your taxpayer, your consumers. So that's one thing I want to change. That's going to take a lot to do. It's not an easy problem to fix, but we've got to get back to that 50-50 split.
Mm.
Then the other one would be, here in Texas, we are the number 1 uninsured state in the nation. We're also the number 1 in maternal mortality. But a lot of things contribute to
So
that. But the
number one, uninsured health insurance wise.
health insurance, yes.
Okay.
So, and then it leads to a lot of other things. Like I said, we're also number 1 in maternal mortality. But we did not accept Medicaid expansion under the Affordable Health Care Act.
Mm.
We're one of now only 12 states who have not. We're leaving billions on the table. And by doing something as just as simple as expanding Medicaid here can ensure a lot more folks, but it also can help pay off some of the uncompensated care that is happening at the hospitals. 80% of that could be paid off.
What do you mean by uncompensated care?
Like when somebody doesn't have insurance and they get their medical treatment at the emergency room.
So basically, if you expand Medicaid, then more people have access to health insurance, and then they also won't go into emergency rooms and not have health insurance that can then pay for their hospital stays. Is that accurate?
Yes, that's exactly right. And the third issue that I have, that I really want to focus on, call me a tree hugger, but clean air and water. We want to make sure.
I mean, it's not a tree hugger. I mean, it's like who does not want clean air and water? I mean, like, I think that's a universal, put it in Maslow's hierarchy. Like, we all want to drink.
We need it.
Clean water and not have to. I remember living in Peru, and literally you had to buy water. Like, you could not drink out of the tap. You had to buy water. And it's so frustrating. I think everyone needs to go to a country where they cannot drink the water, or they get violently ill from having, lettuce that was washed in the water. Because it's not just drinking. It's like, if you want to eat a vegetable, you can only go to a 5-star restaurant where they have the money to wash it in bottled water, or else you're risking your stomach or, some kind of disease to drink that. Right. So I don't think that that's tree hugging at all. I think that's just a basic human need. So anyway, I didn't mean to interrupt you. So clean air.
No, and that's right. And we want to look at our alternative energy sources, our renewable sources. We rely very heavily on finite energy here in Texas. We are, known for oil and gas, natural gas as a big thing here, but we are also number one in solar power and wind power. So we can actually build on that, continue to be that energy leader that we've been known for here in Texas, but make sure now we can focus on clean, renewable energy. And I would love to see that be our standard rather than a big oil and gas.
Absolutely. So let's talk about reproductive rights for a second. I mean, Texas really was I think it was the first state to hit the news to ban abortion. And now Texas bans abortion at all stages of pregnancy, except for a life-threatening medical emergency, which I don't think includes if you're having a, does that, what is, there's so many things that doesn't include a life-saving of, what is life-saving and what is not, right?
Right. And it's so vague because they say at risk of the mother, but let me tell you a scenario that is happening here. More than one occasion it's happened. One woman, she was getting this has been the story of a couple of women that we've heard here in Texas, and it's also the Beto ads show that as well. Couple super excited to be pregnant. All of a sudden, water breaks 18th week. So this particular patient went into the hospital. They said, of course, we know that baby is not viable at that point. They're not going to live outside the womb. So they had to wait for the heartbeat to actually stop, because it is the heartbeat bill. That's how medical professionals at the hospital, they didn't want to touch it because they said, look, we could get in trouble. However, even though we know that baby's not going to make it, that parent went home and got sicker and sicker and was given a description of what has to happen before she can come back to the hospital to have the procedure performed. And it was pretty graphic and detailed. I mean, just the idea that she had to go through all of this. So basically,
she almost had to be dead to come back to pretty much before she came.
Right. She had to go, almost like going into sepsis. So that basically that heartbeat had to stop. Now, eventually they were able to go ahead and do the procedure. However, how many women are going to die? We've already heard too many of these cases. This is what happens when you have two chambers full of mainly men deciding on what should happen with a woman's body. They did not listen to medical professionals. If they had, they would have they would have never come up with this. And it's the most extreme because like you said, it is in the case of, endangering the mother's life. Everything else off limits. Rape, sorry, incest. And so we are going to also see some of those situations here where you're going to have a pregnant 10-year-old and you're going to put her through that and you're going to victimize her twice.
Do you know what I can't understand? I really want to wrap my head around this and I cannot figure it out. Are people not understanding that if young people end up having kids that they can't afford, if they make it through the pregnancy at all, because pregnancy is incredibly dangerous for kids under 18,
right?
That for a state that doesn't want Medicaid expansion on the Republican side, is there not an understanding if people have babies that they cannot afford to take care of, there will be more people who need insurance, public education, welfare, and state benefits because they can't afford to take care of the children? Like, is that missing? Like, why is no one talking about being fiscally conservative as not being like being pro or anti-choice is not? It just doesn't work with being fiscally conservative because all these people are going to end up on welfare.
Right. Yeah, and there's that, and then there's not enough programs for access to contraception. Here in Texas, that Hobby, I don't know if you remember the Hobby Lobby lawsuit. Yeah. And they can basically decide that even employers don't have to provide contraception to their insured, the employees they're insuring. But if we had, just imagine this world, if we will, if we had comprehensive sex education at our schools, because that's what we should be teaching instead of abstinence, which is not realistic for anybody.
Is Texas teaching abstinence? What is Texas teaching? Or is it just
different
by district?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's not. Yeah, we don't. It's basically health. So, yeah, but it's not a specialized. Yeah, it's not a specialized curriculum. They do not teach sex education per se, because we have we have the overarching hand of Christian nationalism, which is kind of dictating what happens when it comes to contraception. Oh my gosh! So you don't we don't get to you have the comprehensive sex education, then you can't, you don't have that access to contraception. So if you want to stop abortion, why
would you not have contraception and comprehensive sexual education? I don't, it's like the research shows that the states with abstinence-only education also have the highest rates of teen pregnancy. So clearly, it's not stopping people from having sex. Saying, "Hey, don't have sex, bad plan." That's not actually stopping anyone from having sex. But again, it's like something that people have missed the memo on, that this doesn't actually like prevent pregnancy, which again makes me feel like. Have you read Pro by Katha Pollitt?
I have not.
Great book. I highly encourage you. But it basically comes back to my feeling that it's about control, and that truthfully, that if women have babies, that ultimately care falls to the women most times, that we cannot compete with men in whatever, that we're not a threat to men's power because we are encumbered by children and pregnancy and all of those types of things.
Right. Yeah, it's amazing, and they don't care about the data behind that though, because like here in Texas, we're number 2 in teen pregnancy, number 1 in repeat teen pregnancy. You would think they'd
teen pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh my God! So someone's getting pregnant at like 16 and 18, or 14 and 16.
Yeah. Yeah. And you would think they would look at that and try to prevent those pregnancies from even occurring in the first place, but no.
So is your opponent in this race the same guy as last time? Who's running against you?
Yes. His name is Kelly Hancock. He started out in the state house in 2007, and then was elected in 2012 to state senate. He, like I said, he is a former school board trustee. So he's kind of come up and through that way, and he's also a business owner. He owns a chemical company that sells to fracking companies. Sounds
like a model social change citizen.
Yeah, he's great, and he was one of the co-authors of the abortion ban here. So he was one of the SB8 co-authors. Yeah.
So I know you have another event to get to. Mm-hmm. I want to ask you 2 more questions. One, Beto O'Rourke. Does he have a shot? I feel bad for the poor guy. Like he's just goes for it and goes for it and goes for it. Do you think he has a shot at winning?
Well, we can't tell through the polls. The polls are so crazy these days. One will
Yeah.
have him, okay, he's at 2 points. Then another one will say 13 or 11. It's like the polls don't know what they're doing any longer. I don't know. But first of all, the thing about Beto is he inspires so many. And when you talked about the midterms and and then 2018, we have to remember that Beto also helped 12 House seats flip and 2 state Senate seats. I mean,
Mm,
because of the mobilization behind him. So even
mhm.
though he was not necessarily elected that time, look at the
Right. He
magic he
helped
did. He
elect.
helped.
Right. Just like the Stacey
Yeah.
Abrams example. Absolutely.
Yeah, and a lot of strong, and a lot, also a lot of strong candidates as well. But I mean, he really helped with that. He really kind of he lifted everybody up as well. And then, the presidential race, that was a little bit of a problem there, but we are excited about him. He's such a genuine person, just like Stacey Abrams. The race I'm looking at too is Rochelle Garza, and I don't know if you've heard anything
Mm,
about that one. She is running against Ken Paxton, and he's our indicted attorney general. We always like to say that, yeah.
mm.
Um,
And what was he
and
indicted for, Gwen?
some sort of securities fraud. But now he's also under investigation by the FBI for kind of like a pay for play kind of thing.
Another
Yeah,
model citizen.
yeah, and of course, and I think he gave his mistress a job. Yeah, yeah, it's great. And his wife is a sitting state senator. Yeah, it's interesting. And they were at the insurrection as well. But
So they were at January 6th.
yeah, they were there on the stage with Trump. Yeah, they spoke. Yeah. Yeah. So Rochelle Garza has taken on Ken Paxton in the whole women's healthcare issue, and she's actually won a lawsuit against him. And this is somebody who is representative of Texas. She is from the Rio Grande Valley. She'd be the first Latina for that, and it's a woman, and she's so strong. And we really want to pump her up, and I can't wait for her to be my next attorney general.
That's super exciting. That's so
Yeah.
exciting. And what was
Mhm.
the reaction, out of curiosity of Texans to Governor Abbott just taking, immigrants and sticking them in Martha's Vineyard? And I was in an Uber driver the other day going to synagogue for the high holidays, and my Uber driver was like, "Oh, I was behind this van that just literally just like dumped these people on Kamala Harris's lawn and just left them there."
Oh, wow,
Like,
you
he was
actually
like, I
saw
was
it.
behind the van. Yeah, he said, it's just
Ah.
this van just like, this unmarked van just comes up, just like opens its doors, lets these people out and
Mhm.
drives away.
Right.
I mean, it's like so bonkers. I mean,
Yeah.
what's people's perceptions in Texas of how Abbott is dealing with immigration?
Depends on who you talk to.
Yeah.
Uh, I mean, what they don't talk about is the reality of this. These people that they're dropping off at Martha's Vineyard and at Kamala's house, these are people who came legally seeking, oh my gosh.
Asylum.
Thank you so much. I was losing my words. They came here legally seeking asylum from countries that we're seeing most of them from Colombia, Venezuela, so many that they're coming in droves because of what's happening there. It's like they feel they have no other choice. Um, but the narrative plays out that these are like people crossing the borders illegally. Uh,
Mm,
and the Republican narrative on border security is that, Biden is soft on border security. We have to do something. It was why Abbott, stopped the supply chain when he was checking every, truck that came in, uh, causing billion. I think it was over $1 billion that we lost on that little venture. Not to mention Operation Lone Star. But the narrative, it just depends on who you speak with. It's basically Beto and the Democrats are just for open borders and
what is your view on immigration, Gwen?
so I'm at the perspective. I do not think that anyone wants our borders to not be secure. Of course we do. I don't know that a wall is necessarily the answer because we've tried that, and it's a lot of land to put a wall on. We've got to come up with other strategies. Also, those that need to be more humane. So that's one of the things that we need to look at. But yeah, there are a lot of solutions that should be done by a lot of people smarter than me on the border. But this he said, she said, or they said thing is not helping anybody and it's solving nothing. So can
Mm.
we all come together and come up with some real solutions instead of just blaming the other guy, especially at election time?
Yeah, I have a friend. It's like people think Biden's so soft on immigration. I have a friend, LGBTQ activist from Zimbabwe, has had death threats against her life. She was in the U.S. seeking asylum for the last 5 years, and her asylum claim was rejected. She was deported to back to Zimbabwe, where she's had death threats. She's now fled to South Africa. She's trying to get a visa to Canada. She's like, I'm trying to help her get a job in Canada and help her financially. She should absolutely have gotten asylum, and she didn't. So, our immigration system rejects people under both administrations that really are well deserving, and
Right.
deserve it as much as my grandparents who escaped anti-Semitism in Poland, right? And
Oh, yeah.
wherever your family history comes from, so many
Mhm.
of our families came escaping persecution, and
Right.
people seem to forget that.
Yeah, they forget
So
we're a nation of immigrants.
we're a nation of immigrants. And immigrants are
Yeah,
huge job suppliers.
right.
Immigrants work the hardest and they also pick the food that we eat. People don't realize that, I've had students that were from Mexican Americans and like they worked in the fields as kids.
Mhm.
Literally, it's like the salad that you ate at lunch today, like the vegetables were probably picked by Mexican Americans or by
Right.
Mexicans. And
Mhm.
people don't understand that, like Americans don't want to go work in the fields making bupkis, picking, the
Mhm.
corn at, one of my students used to go at 4 a.m. to
Yeah,
pick food before school and then after,
yeah,
when she was 8 years old.
right,
Like her family worked really hard to be able to stay in the US,
right.
and that's people don't acknowledge that hard
Yeah.
work.
And was she a dreamer? She
She
that's the
was she a dreamer? I think her parents, I'm not sure actually. She might be a dreamer, I'm not sure.
mhm. That's the one thing too. We look at, that was a good, you know, temporary program, but the what we see what our dreamers have to go through to try and gain citizenship is there's no path for it as a
Yeah.
dreamer.
And they're
So
such
something's
hard
got to give.
workers. And they've lived here their whole lives. They don't,
Yeah.
bringing them back to Mexico to, some of them don't even
Mhm.
speak Spanish. It's like,
Right.
their spouses are here, their education is here, their jobs are here, and then it's just like just because, something that happened years ago, they're now gone.
Yeah.
Um, Anyway, so I want to let you go to your next event, but how can people help you win this race? What can they do? Please tell everybody.
Yes. Yes. Okay. So yeah, we are in this final stretch, and I got to tell you, your dollars will really, really help. We have paid canvassers. We're also doing our streaming ads on YouTube and on Hulu. And it's because we want to reach those younger voters. They don't want our mailers. We've already sent our mailers out to those.
I
They,
check
we
my
got to
mail
reach
and
them
I
where
just
they
get
are.
overwhelmed. I'm like, oh my God, there's so
Yeah.
many flyers. I
There's
can't
so
handle
many
it.
flowers. We already got those for those people. So we really want to focus on our younger voters, but also we need block walkers bad. We have had to switch gears. Normally we have this thing called get out the vote. And that's where you pass out, you just leave your literature at the door. Unfortunately, we know that the data is not helping with that. And here in Texas, we've seen from our early voting that we are not showing up in the numbers that we did in
Mm,
2018. So we have switched to going back to knocking on doors, and we need more folks for that. So we would love if you could sign up to volunteer. We are on Mobilize America. Just look. My last name is Burud, B like boy, URUD. You can find us there, or you can go to my website, sign up. That's Burud, BURUD, for Texas.com.
awesome. So it sounds like donate, 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 and
Yeah.
hit the streets. Like I was saying before, talking to
Yeah.
voters really does it's so impactful. It's also just a really powerful experience to knock on doors.
Mhm.
To talk to strangers. I think it's some of the most
Yeah.
humanizing experiences that I've had in my life has been
Mhm.
knocking, on doors in all Black neighborhoods,
Yeah.
all Latino neighborhoods, like
Mhm.
really just hearing people's perspectives. It's such a humanizing, enriching life experience, like beyond just getting out the vote, that I think everybody
Right.
frankly should have. So
Yes, yeah, and the data says that is the most effective
it
one,
really
so
is. It really
mhm.
is. Awesome. So make sure you go to Gwenn's website. Say it one more time. It's burudfortexas.com.
Yes, and the
And
Burud is that B-U-R-U-D.
BURUD, and go to Mobilize America if you want to
Uh-huh.
volunteer and help get out the vote. Gwenn,
Yes.
thank you so much for coming on the
Oh,
show. I wish you the best of luck in this race, and I
thank
applaud
you, Samantha.
your going back to the beginning and saying, no one's running against him. You know what? I'm gonna run. I mean, that's what we as women need to do, is to be like, oh, there's an open seat, and not wait for somebody else and say, well, they're a politician. They're not I'm not a politician. Like, nobody's a politician. This guy is a freaking chemical manufacturer, fracking, sounds like, I don't know, unethical, climate change, anti-abortion lunatic. So,
Yeah, there you
I
go.
love that you just said, I'm going to run. Like, as somebody who teaches women's leadership, that element of just like, sometimes it's like, okay, it's time. Like, no more excuses. Take the risk. If you're going to fail, fail fabulously, and let's go. So, Gwenn, thank you for coming on the show. Have a great event tonight,
Oh,
and best of
thank you.
luck. I can't wait to see what happens in your race.
Oh, thank you so much, Samantha. I so enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
All right. Have a great night, Gwenn.
You too.
So that was Gwenn Burud, who's running in Texas in a very competitive district, and clearly a pioneer of education. She really cares about climate change, clean air and clean water. I mean, reproductive rights. It's just so horrifying hearing what's happening to people in terms of reproductive rights. I frankly didn't know that Texas has such high maternal mortality rates. Abstinence only education, even though they have the second highest rate of teen pregnancy within the US, and of repeat teen pregnancy. That's also horrifying. I'm not sure, I can't imagine myself having taken care of a child adequately when I was 16 years old or 14 or 18. My mom probably would have taken care of the child, which, not a way to raise a kid. So I want to encourage you to vote for her, to volunteer for her, and to donate. Even if you're not in Texas, you can obviously donate, and you can probably make calls. November 8th is coming up. As people said, this is the last stretch. Donate, 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 volunteer, go knock on doors. If you are a Democrat, go to democrats.org to sign up and to see volunteer opportunities. Knocking on doors really, really does work. And this last stretch really makes the last bit of difference. And go beyond those people that you see on MSNBC, on CNN, on Fox. Go to those local candidates. You could tell, hearing from Susanna, they really need our support, but they're often overshadowed by congressional races, which get more of the money and the glamour and the PR. But yet, as Olivia was saying, building that bench is so important, because the state senators become the congresspersons, become the senators, become the vice presidential nominees. It really is a line. Even school level PTO is a breeding ground for future congresspersons, for future senators, for future attorneys generals of a state. So, really volunteer for those local candidates. If you're somebody that says, I don't do politics, well, I go to my friend Michael Sani, who runs something called Bite the Ballot in the UK. And he says, if you don't do politics, politics will do you. Politics is embedded in all of our lives. We cannot ignore it. It affects whether you get your bill paid for when you go to the hospital. It affects whether you have clean water or clean air. It affects your job opportunities. It affects your, being able to get an abortion. It affects your education. It affects sex education. I mean, there's so many things that politics does affect within your lives, and yet people seem to know more about fantasy football or sports statistics than they do about their congressperson. So also get educated before you vote. Do your research, figure out what's going on, see if you can vote early. A lot of places now have voting early, so you can go in and vote early before the election. But do not miss these elections on November 8th. If you liked this episode, please share it with your social media on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. I don't care. Whatever you're on, TikTok, please share this episode. We are also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you're listening to this on YouTube, please subscribe to us and give us that 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple so that people can find us and are able to hear this content and coverage. There's a lot of right-wing YouTubers out there, especially women. That's part of why I started this show, because there were very few on the left that were covering politics that are women on YouTube. And I need your help to get these voices out there. I cannot do this alone. So I'm asking you to help me. and to help these amazing women running for office. Lastly, you can really show your support by becoming a member on Patreon. It's patreon.com/Samanthropolitics, SAMANTHRO, and then the word politics, for as little as $3 a month to support our production costs, to support all of the time and research and energy that goes into producing this show. I also want to thank Zach at Stream Inspectors. Every time I say, hey, Zach, can you put up that slide? Zach has been doing this show with me for 2 years. Stream Inspectors are the leaders in live stream production. If you want a really cool show like this, look up Stream Inspectors. Maybe you can even get me to come host it for you. Depends on the topic, but we can work that out. But look up Stream Inspectors. I think that's it for tonight. I'm excited to see what happens on November 8th, and we'll see you on the next episode of Samanthropolitics. Thanks again for listening, and good night.